Breaking news coming in, viewers. Poland has once again scrambled its fighter jets. And this is happening after Ukraine says Russia launched a major attack on Kiev and other cities involving hundreds of drones and missiles. At least 4 people were injured. 4 people were killed, including a 12-year-old girl in the capital and other regions. Poland scrambled fighter jets to secure its airspace in view of these strikes. An air raid alert was in place over the Kiev region, with the local military administration saying that Russia was attacking with drones and missiles now. Some residents fled to metro stations deep underground for safety. Many regions across the country were under air raid alerts. The Kiev mayor said that the Ukrainian capital was under a massive assault and urged people to stay in shelters. Coming to Poland, the Polish armed forces said that they scrambled aircraft to ensure the security of its airspace after Russia launched strikes on Ukraine. The flight tracking service, Flight Radar 24, said that Poland closed its airspace near its southeastern cities of Lublin and Rzeszów due to unplanned military activity related to ensuring state security. That's the breaking news coming in at this, viewers. At this time, Russia carries out an attack on Kiev. And while alarm bells are sounding across Ukraine, Poland has also scrambled its fighter jets and closed its airspace in certain regions. At least 4 people were killed, including a 12-year-old girl in the capital and other regions, that is in Ukraine. Air raid alerts were in place over the Kiev region, with the local military administration saying that Russia was attacking not just with drones but with missiles. But while the war between Russia and Ukraine has been going on for well over 3 years now, this time, after this attack, it was Poland which also scrambled fighter jets to secure its own airspace. The Polish armed forces said that they scrambled aircraft. And the flight tracking service, Flight Radar 24, has mentioned that Poland closed its airspace near southeastern cities of Lublin and Rzeszów due to unplanned military activity related to ensuring state security.
The Russia-Ukraine war has entered fresh phase of escalation with an unprecedented 12-hour attack on Kyiv. Russia has scaled up its offensive on Ukraine, leaving Kyiv and European nations on their toes, with fear of expansion of war beyond Ukraine. Throughout the intervening night of 27th and 28th of September, swarms of Shahed-styled drones were spotted in Kyiv, Zaporizhia and Sumy regions. Air raid sirens blared even in areas far from the front line. Ukraine says 500 drones and over 40 Russian missiles swarmed the country, with capital Kyiv being worst hit. Now, according to Ukraine, Russia also scrambled Tu-95 bombers and MiG-31K bombers during the attack. At least 4 people were reportedly killed, with several residential and non-residential buildings catching fire in Kyiv. The latest activity comes amid increased tension and rising fears of a wider conflict spilling into Europe. During the latest Russian offensive, Poland closed airspace of its 2 provinces bordering Ukraine. Poland's Air Force said it deployed Polish and Allied aircraft to secure its airspace. Flight tracking service Flight Radar 24 said Poland closed airspace near its southeastern cities of Lublin and Rzeszów due to unplanned military activity related to ensuring state security. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called Russian attack vile and vowed to respond to the attack. Finland president said Russia is targeting civilians in cold blood. The EU and NATO are flexing their muscle in the light of Russia's alleged airspace violations and drone sightings. President Trump has backed calls to shoot down Russian planes that violate NATO airspace. NATO has announced that it was upgrading its mission in the Baltic Sea with an air defense frigate and other assets. Defense ministers from about 10 EU nations have vowed to build a drone wall. EU leaders are set to meet for an informal European Council in Copenhagen on Wednesday. The agenda is to discuss how to strengthen Europe's common defense and the support for Ukraine. But before the high-stakes meeting, Denmark has announced to ban all civilian drone flights across the country for the week. According to Denmark, unidentified drones were observed near military installations overnight on Saturday. In neighboring Norway, police say they are investigating possible drone sightings near the Åland Air Force Base in the central region, the main base for Norway's F-35 jets. Russia has denied all the allegations. Speaking at the United Nations General Assembly, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov warned NATO and the European Union that any aggression against Russia will be met with a decisive response.
Threats of force against Russia, accused of practically planning an attack on the North Atlantic Alliance and the European Union, are becoming increasingly common. President Putin has repeatedly debunked such provocations. Russia has never had and does not have such intentions, but any aggression against my country will be met with a decisive response.
If we talk about alleged Russian violations and drone sightings this month, Poland had detected drones in its airspace on September 10th. Romania also detected drones in the country's airspace, which were tracked down by 2 F-16 jets. On September 19th, Russian MiG-31 aircraft spent 12 minutes in Estonia's airspace, prompting a response from NATO aircraft. Norway has also detected drones multiple times, with recent sightings reported near the Åland base. Latvia and Germany have also reported similar sightings. September 22nd, Copenhagen's airport was closed for hours. Drones were also spotted near 5 other places in Denmark, forcing closure of airspace over Aalborg Airport. On September 26th, drones were spotted at a naval base in Sweden and Lithuania. However, Russia has denied or not owned up to most of these allegations. Mr. Ben Aris is a founder and editor-in-chief of BNE IntelliNews and also former Moscow bureau chief for the Daily Telegraph. He's now joining us live from Berlin. Mr. Aris, good to see you, and thank you very much for making time for us. President Zelensky says this latest attack by Russia was vile, and Russia seems unrelenting with their drone warfare. What's the message here?
It's an escalation. Putin is turning the screws, and he has been since May, when the ceasefire talks really got underway, led by the White House, led by Trump. Putin's response to the beginning of the talks, the groups were meeting in various places like Riyadh, Istanbul. However, accompanying that, Putin turned the screws by tripling the number of drones and missiles that he fires at Ukraine, hitting targets. This weekend, again, Kiev was hit. 2 dozen people were killed, including some children. And the point is to keep Kiev under pressure, as Putin's being very uncompromising. The so-called ceasefire or peace deal that he's offering is basically a capitulation. And at the same time, it's a response because Ukraine has now developed some of its own cruise missiles, and it also is now targeting economic assets, mainly oil refineries, inside Russia. So we're seeing a steady escalation in the destruction and the violence that's going on in this war.
Mr. Aris, the EU and NATO are flexing their muscle in the light of Russia's alleged airspace violations and also drone sightings. Russia says these nations are worried over nothing. Do you think measures taken by the EU or NATO are good enough to deter Russia?
A two-part answer to that. First of all, of course they should be worried. I mean, the latest development of this escalation is now that Russia is clearly probing NATO's air defenses, and it's gone from striking Ukraine with missiles to flying drones over EU countries like Poland. Started with Poland, and then Romania was the next day, and then we had 3 jets, Russian jets, fly over Estonia, and then Copenhagen, the airport was closed down because of a reported Russian drone threat, which was later dismissed. And this should be very worrying. And the second part to your question is no, they're not ready. The Polish incident showed that we had 19 drones, reconnaissance drones, unarmed, no explosives on board, that cost $10,000 each. Poland spent, in the course of a few hours, 1.2 billion euros shooting them down, because the only thing it has is expensive Patriot Sidewinders. And what they need, what they're facing, is a swarm, hundreds of drones coming across the border should Russia invade. And they have nothing to take that down. They'll run out of Patriots within hours. And they need to get ready. So this has provoked this talk of a drone war. And then we've had like the Polish foreign minister in Kiev, and the Ukrainians are offering to help. Basically, Ukraine comes into its own, and it has this technology, it has the production, it's making 2 million drones plus, it's going to make 4 million this year, and they're going to sell that to the EU. But EU's been caught napping. I mean, it should have put all of this stuff in place like 3 years ago, and now it's scrambling to catch up.
All right, Mr. Ben Aris, it's good to see you. Thank you very much for talking to us today.
Russia's war machine is on overdrive. Moscow claims a wave of massive group strikes against Ukraine. But Kiev has hit back with its drone attack on Russia's major oil refinery in Krasnodar Krai. Just as the bombs rain down, Russia itself is in turmoil. It is grappling with one of the worst fuel crises in years. Our report tells you about the escalating firestorm right there. Take a look.
Sirens blare across Ukrainian skies. Russia unleashes massive group strikes. A barrage of high-precision weapons and unmanned attack drones bound Ukrainian cities through the night. Explosions light up the horizon, shaking buildings and shattering lives yet again.
The overall losses of the Russians in our Dobropilia counteroffensive alone are already more than 3,000, and most of them are irretrievable losses. It was there that the Russians wanted to make one of their significant breakthroughs on the front line, but our forces are neutralizing them, and that is important.
Kiev is striking back with precision. Ukrainian drones are targeting major oil refineries and energy infrastructure deep inside Russia. In less than 2 months, Ukrainian forces have struck 85 high-value targets in Russia. The strikes have pushed Russia's gasoline and diesel supplies to breaking point. Ukraine is using long-range drones to strike strategic energy facilities. It is reaching further into Russian territory than any point since the war began. At least 16 of Russia's 38 oil refineries have been hit since the beginning of August, some of them repeatedly targeted. Among the most significant targets is the massive 340,000 barrel per day refinery in Ryazan, located near Moscow. Other key refineries struck in recent weeks include major plants in Saratov, Novokuybishevsk, Volgograd and Bashkortostan. On September 18th, Ukrainian drones managed to penetrate deep into central Russia to hit the Gazprom Neftekhim Salavat oil refinery and petrochemical plant in Bashkortostan, about 1,400 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. That same day, a second strike targeted one of Russia's largest oil refineries in Volgograd, nearly 1,000 kilometers south of Moscow. The scale of disruption is unprecedented in Russia. Experts believe Ukrainian attacks have disrupted over 1 million barrels per day of Russia's refining capacity. Fuel crisis has hit the domestic market quite hard. Russia, the second largest exporter of diesel in the world, is taking drastic steps to conserve fuel for domestic use. While diesel exports have fallen sharply, Russia has banned petrol exports till the end of this year. Among all the regions, Crimea has been worst hit by the fuel crisis. Around 50% of gas stations in Crimea have halted sales due to the lack of fuel. While the timing couldn't be more devastating for the Kremlin, Russia is already reeling under its biggest fuel crisis in years, long queues at petrol stations, soaring diesel prices, and industries struggling to keep wheels turning. For millions caught in between, the price of this war is only climbing higher.
Several days ago, we had some difficulties. Yesterday, I queued for about 40 minutes to fill my tank, but I don't see anything critical or serious for me personally. I'm not panicking. I believe everything will stabilize. Everything will be fine.
I came to this gas station to see if there was any petrol. It appeared yesterday. Before that, for several days, there was no petrol at any station. It was a problem.
Massive strikes, exploding oil tanks, and fuel shortages. Russia and Ukraine are both turning up the heat. The big question is, how much longer can Moscow sustain this war while battling a crisis in its own backyard? Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Poland briefly closed part of its airspace southeast of the capital, Warsaw, citing unplanned military activity as Russia launched a new wave of strikes against Ukraine. Now, Ukraine's President Zelensky claimed that Russia launched around 500 drones and over 40 missiles in this overnight attack. At least 4 people were reported killed. Poland's Air Force said that it deployed on Sunday of Polish and allied aircraft to secure airspace after hundreds of Russian drones and missiles hit Ukrainian capital Kiev. Flight tracking service Flight Radar 24 said that Poland closed its airspace near its southeastern cities of Lublin and Rzeszów due to unplanned military activity related to ensuring state security. The latest activity comes amid increased tension and rising fears of a wider conflict spilling into Europe. EU and NATO are flexing their strength in the light of Russia's alleged airspace violations and drone sightings. US President Donald Trump backed calls to shoot down Russian planes that violate NATO airspace. NATO has announced that it was upgrading its mission in the Baltic Sea with an air defense frigate and other assets. And these assets include intelligence surveillance and reconnaissance platforms. Defense ministers from about 10 EU nations announced their intention to build a so-called drone wall. EU leaders will meet for an informal European Council in Copenhagen on Wednesday to discuss how to strengthen Europe's common defense and the support for Ukraine. Now, all this has invited a strong response from Russia. Speaking at the UNGA, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov warned NATO and the European Union that any aggression against my country will be met with a decisive response.
Threats of force against Russia, accused of practically planning an attack on the North Atlantic Alliance and the European Union, are becoming increasingly common. President Putin has repeatedly debunked such provocations. Russia has never had and does not have such intentions, but any aggression against my country will be met with a decisive response.
Now, according to Denmark, Unidentified drones were observed near military installations overnight on Saturday. In neighboring Norway, police said they are investigating possible drone sightings near the Åland Air Force Base in the central region, the main base for Norway's F-35 jets. If we talk about alleged Russian violations and drone sightings this month, Poland had detected drones in its airspace on the 10th of September. Romania detected drones in the country's airspace, which were tracked down by two F-16 jets. On September 19th, Russian MiG-31 aircraft spent 12 minutes in Estonia's airspace, prompting a response from NATO aircraft. And Norway has also detected drones multiple times, with recent sightings reported near the Åland base. Latvia and Germany have also reported similar sightings. September 22nd, Copenhagen's airport was closed for hours. Drones were also spotted near 5 other places in Denmark. Drones were forced. They also forced closure of airspace over Aalborg Airport. On the 26th of September, then, drones were spotted by Karlskrona Naval Base in Sweden. However, Russia has denied or not owned up to most of these allegations.
Now, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has accused Russia of launching drones against European countries from shadow fleets. Zelensky, citing an intelligence report, suggested that Russia was using its shadow fleet tankers to launch and control the drones. Listen in.
There is now intelligence that indicates that the Russians are using tankers to launch and operate drones against European countries. This is yet more evidence why the Baltic Sea and other seas must be closed to Russian tankers, at the very least to the shadow fleet.
Zelensky also spoke about the barrage of drones and missiles that were fired into Ukraine by Russia overnight, which resulted in the death of at least 4 people, including a 12-year-old girl, as Kiev suffered the heaviest assault. He added that Moscow wanted to continue fighting and only deserved harshest pressure from the world. Now, Russia claimed it had only hit military targets during the attack. Now, following the massive aerial barrage, Zelensky held a round of calls with allies, including NATO chief Mark Rutte, Finnish President Alexander Stubb, and Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Store. Neighboring Poland scrambled jets to secure its airspace in the wake of the barrage after NATO accused Moscow of being behind a series of violations of the Defense Alliance's airspace. Poland's armed forces said the Warsaw had scrambled fighter jets in its airspace and put ground-based air defense systems on high alert. In recent weeks, several European countries have accused Russia of violating their airspace with drones and fighter jets in what NATO sees as a test of its resolve. In the latest, Denmark has decided to close its airspace to civilian drones following the threat from suspected Russian drone incursions near its military bases and civilian airports. The decision was taken by Danish Transport Ministry to safeguard the upcoming European Council meeting set in Copenhagen. Now, amidst the accusations by EU countries, Belarus President Alexander Lukashenko has warned NATO that any attempt to shoot down Russian or Belarusian aircraft will be met with a swift response. In an interview, Lukashenko said NATO countries were intimidating their populations with the supposed drone threat emanating from Belarus and Russia. His comments came after Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov told the UN General Assembly that Russia does not intend to attack Europe, but would mount a decisive response to any aggression.
They are worried and they threaten us with an attack, which means they will defend themselves and even attack us. And what will we do? Will we be dragging our feet? It's a brave statement. They said they will shoot down. Let them try. Let them shoot. Or they'll shoot down something Russian over Kaliningrad. Then, of course, we'll have to fight, as they say in Russia, with all we've got. Is that necessary? No.
In the meantime, Ukraine carried out strikes on Sunday that targeted Russian energy infrastructure in Belgorod. Local telegram channels reported that several explosions took place at the local thermal power plant, causing blackout in the city. Belgorod mayor confirmed disruptions with electricity and water supply.
The enemy hit infrastructure. We are currently assessing the damage. There are significant disruptions in the power supply. We are now working to address the consequences and will take all possible measures to first connect backup generation where necessary and possible, and to restore supply wherever we can in order to meet the needs of the population and our enterprises.
On the other hand, Finnish President Alexander Stubb has taken a more lenient stance while dealing with Russia. Stubb was responding to Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov's remarks, which blamed EU and NATO for declaring war against Russia on the behest of Ukraine. In a CNN interview, he dismissed the assertion, saying, I'm quoting here, "We are not at war with Russia," and asked for a carrot and stick approach.
Breaking news coming in, viewers. Poland has once again scrambled its fighter jets. And this is happening after Ukraine says Russia launched a major attack on Kiev and other cities involving hundreds of drones and missiles. At least 4 people were injured. 4 people were killed, including a 12-year-old girl in the capital and other regions. Poland scrambled fighter jets to secure its airspace in view of these strikes. An air raid alert was in place over the Kiev region, with the local military administration saying that Russia was attacking with drones and missiles now. Some residents fled to metro stations deep underground for safety. Many regions across the country were under air raid alerts. The Kiev mayor said that the Ukrainian capital was under a massive assault and urged people to stay in shelters. Coming to Poland, the Polish armed forces said that they scrambled aircraft to ensure the security of its airspace after Russia launched strikes on Ukraine. The flight tracking service, Flight Radar 24, said that Poland closed its airspace near its southeastern cities of Lublin and Rzeszów due to unplanned military activity related to ensuring state security. That's the breaking news coming in at this, viewers. At this time, Russia carries